Okay, I see that notification on. Does that include the broadcasting as well?
Sorry, that's just me started that.
Okay. Owen, can you confirm broadcasting and recording is commenced? Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm obliged now to read out the following statement. Thanks everybody for attending today's meeting. Just a brief statement on the protocols to be followed during this remote meeting. Please note this meeting has been broadcast live on YouTube and a recording will be made for public viewing following the meeting. Can members and all participants please mute their microphones during the meeting when not speaking? This is important as it helps ensure the quality of order for all present. Your microphone should be switched on when invited to speak and switched off when you're finished speaking. Please use the raised hand button to indicate that you wish to speak at any point. Can I ask officers to introduce themselves by confirming names and role before speaking for the first time on any item? If any members or any participant lose connection or have any technical issues, please alert the clerk as soon as possible. I will now ask the clerk to carry out a roll call of elected members participating in today's meeting. David?
Thanks, Chair. If I can just confirm the members present. Councillor Benny.
Apologies from Councillor Benny.
Apologies, thank you. Councillor Barrow.
Present.
Councillor Dodds.
Present.
Councillor Farmer.
Present.
Councillor Gibson.
Present.
Councillor Houston.
Present.
Councillor Harrison.
Here.
Councillor MacDonald.
Here.
And Councillor Thompson.
Present.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that, David. And item 1 on the agenda, apologies and substitutions. Now, is there a substitution for Councillor Benny? Does anyone know? No. Okay. So we've already been, so there is no further apologies or substitutions. Item 2, declarations of interest. Any declarations? No. Okay, there is no urgent business. Item 3, so we'll move to item 4. It's the minutes from the Plan and Regulation panel from the 7th of September 2021. These are just for accuracy. Does anyone want to pick up any points they want to raise or anything regarding them? If not, does somebody want to move them? Councillor Thompson, I'm happy to second them. Okay, move to the first planning item on the agenda, which is application for approval of matters specified in conditions numbers 1 and 9 and 12 of planning permission 17/00978 for the erection of 11 affordable dwelling houses, land adjacent to number 1 and number 2 Lampson Road, Killearn, for Rural Stirling Housing Association. This one is a hearing, and I'm going to read out the guidance for the hearing here before it. The order of the hearing is the introduction of the report by the planning officer, presentation by the applicants, presentation by any supporters, presentation by any objectors, and presentation by any local members who wishes to speak. And these are all limited to 5 minutes, and I will ask everybody after 4 minutes, I have a stopwatch here, to start to sum up. And if the applicant has any unused time, they're entitled to use that at the end to sum up. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Peter McKechnie. Peter, your officer for this application.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm Peter McKechnie, planning officer who processed this application. As you correctly state, it's an application for matters specified by conditions, seeking approval of submissions submitted in respect of conditions 1 to 9 and 12 of PPP approval 17/00978 PPP. I'd like to firstly point out that the applicants brought to our attention a concern regarding condition 13 yesterday, where they have actually obtained a license for disturbing the bat roosts that are within the site, and are therefore seeking an amendment to that condition 13. So I'd like the clerk to note, please, that should the application be approved, there'll be a need to amend condition 13. So if that could be noted in the minutes, please. Basically, we'll be removing the last part of the condition that sets out that the tree can only be removed during the winter months, because they have a license to remove the tree during the winter months. Okay. Here we have the application site outlined in red. The application site, it sits within the countryside at the end of Lampson Road, in a predominantly residential area. We have woodland that's here, that's designated as ancient woodland, and that designation does cut through the site and comes across like so. Here we have an aerial view satellite image of the site. Again, we have the site in here, and you can see from this image the trees I was referring to that fall within the ancient woodland. As I said, the designation comes across. Trees have in the past been removed from the site that do fall within the ancient woodland. Also, the site is covered by a tree preservation order that covers, it's a blanket tree preservation order that covers all trees in this area, including within the site and out with the site. We have an oak tree here within the site that's to be removed, and then a younger oak as well that's self-seeded, also to be removed as part of the development. We have an image here looking northwest across the site. As you can see, some of the trees that were within the site that have been removed in the past. Here we have the oak tree that I was referring to, that has the back roost within it and is to be removed as part of the development and is covered by the tree preservation order. Moving on now to the site plan. The proposals include semi-detached cottage flats, 2 lots of cottage flats, and a bungalow for the purposes of, and it's adapted bungalow, so for somebody that would have a disability. As set out by the PPP approval and the Section 75 agreement that was signed, all houses are for affordable houses to be run and managed by Rural Stirling Housing Association. So you can see each have the semi-detached properties each have their own driveway and access out onto Lampson Road. The cottage bungalows or the cottage flats are to have a central parking area here in the middle, and the adapted bungalow has its own parking as well. Proposals include new planting with garden area and hedging along the frontage, and fencing to demarc each where they're having their own garden space. It's been offset here, which will be planted up as well in terms of meadow flowers, etc. That's all covered through the planning conditions, but one of the main reasons for the offset is to ensure protection of these trees, which are all to be retained in this area, apart from one that's dead, and that's an oak tree, and that's set out in the tree survey that's needs to be removed as it's no longer living. Previously, the applicants had originally proposed to bring their drainage down through here, which would have had an impact on trees. Instead, they're bringing it in through the car park area here, so it ensures the protection of these trees, seeking to minimise the impact on trees. We have a new footpath as well that's proposed as part of the development coming along the frontage, with bin store areas set in behind the hedging and cycle storage as well set in at the frontage here and behind the hedging. There's also proposals for car electric charging points within the development. And the boundary walls, you'll see sections coming up that the site slopes down, so there's a need for boundary retention walls along this area here and in this area here as well, but they're set back to protect the trees. This slide is being put on here to show the fact that this orange line here depicts the root protection zone for the trees, showing that the site has been designed to protect and maximise the tree retention in this area. Here we have the semi-detached property, elevations and floor plans, and again the elevations of the semi-detached property. This is the adapted bungalow with the floor plans and the elevations, and the cottage flats. For the cottage flats, this elevation here will face across the fields, and this is your elevation here that faces out onto Lampson Road itself. There's actually, this is an older 3D image you'll see from the elevations here, that it's been adapted, this elevation, to minimise the impacts on the streetscape. So it's they've hit the roof, and they've introduced a mix of materials to break up the massing and glazing as well, to help assimilate it within the overall urban streetscape. These proposals also show that there's to be air source heat pumps as part of the cottage flats, and solar panels as well. There's a real mixture of materials going to be used on the build, which I'll come to in a few minutes. Here we have the sections. The farming level site to marry in with Lampson Road itself, and as you can see, the site falls quite a bit to the agricultural fields beyond. This slide, the area in pink, depicts where the new footpath is proposed. So yeah, when we have a mixture of materials, as I was saying, there's going to be brickwork, render, concrete tiles on the roof, cedral cladding, and grey UPVC windows and doors, all materials that are considered to respect the character of the area. This is the bike shelter that I'd referenced on the site plan. This is the type of shelter that is shown to be proposed, but could change as part of future proposals. But at the moment, this is the type of shelter that's proposed for the bike store. Here we have 3D images of the proposal. So this is looking from the northeast, from the fields beyond, looking through the car park courtyard that's to be formed between the two lots of cottage flats. And this is taken from the end of at the T-junction with Lampson, within Lampson Road itself, looking down towards the main B8 road, with the adapted bungalow and the cottage flats there. So it gives a rough idea of the kind of streetscape that's going to be formed. And that concludes my presentation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Peter. I'm going to go next stage of the hearing as a presentation by the applicant. The applicant's Rural Stirling Housing Association, and we have Margaret Vass. Mrs. Vass, your presentation has to be limited to 5 minutes, and after 4 minutes I'll ask you to sum up. If you want to proceed, please.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Margaret Vass, and I'm a board member and former chairperson at Rural Stirling Housing Association. It is unusual for a board member to address a planning hearing rather than our CEO. However, I want you to understand the importance our board places on delivering this urgently needed affordable housing in Killearn. We are passionate about the delivery of new homes. There are high levels of need and high house prices throughout the Stirling rural southwest area, with equally high numbers of waiting list applicants for lets. In Killearn, the waiting list ratio is 12 applicants to every social rent property. That is the demand we actually know about, as it is acknowledged that much demand is hidden, particularly homelessness in rural areas. This was shown in neighbouring Strathblane when a local housing needs survey was carried out by the Rural Housing Scotland in 2019 with funding from Stirling Council. Private letting is the main alternative tenure to owning in rural southwest, but rent levels continue to be high and not affordable to local people doing vital low-paid jobs. The site at Lampson Road is considered suitable for provision of affordable housing, and we were delighted when Stirling Council asked us to take forward the development. Rural Stirling purchased the land in 2019 with the support of Scottish Government funding from the Affordable Housing Supply Programme, with the intention to build 11 properties, all of these for social rent. The planning permission in principle application submitted by the previous landowner for the development proposal of 12 homes for this site met with considerable objection from the local community and neighbouring property owners, with concerns voiced over several aspects of the design that was submitted. After purchasing the site, we established a community panel to take the development forward. The design team and RSHA representatives held a number of meetings with nearby residents and Killearn Community Council. And in response to the feedback received at these meetings, the design was extensively revised and enhanced, as just has been described to you. The number of units was reduced from 12 to 11, which allowed the layout of the housing to be opened up to maintain views through the new development from the adjacent properties. The upper cottage flats were reduced to 2/3 height, and the placement of other units was changed to reduce the impact on views from the neighbouring upper windows. Properties were rotated so that their main aspects are now facing away from Lampson Road, and additional design features have been given to gable ends now facing Lampson Road as a result. This process has resulted in a design that has been adapted to address local concerns, meet local and national policy, and will provide robust, sustainable and low-cost housing. Our design proposal for the Lampson Road site also includes a wheelchair accessible property specifically designed for a family with specialist needs in urgent need of new housing. We have no other suitable properties to offer the family currently living in overcrowded and extremely unsuitable accommodation. Affordable housing here at Lampson Road will be an enormously welcome development for this family and for all its future tenants currently waiting for high quality, affordable and energy efficient housing in the area. It will provide local people in need of appropriate housing with affordable, well-built and economical homes in the community they feel most connected to, a priority for both Rural Stirling Housing Association and Stirling Council. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thanks for that, Mrs. Vass. You have a minute and 8 seconds left if you want to use it after. And I'll now move to the next section of the hearing, which is a presentation by supporters, which there is none. So the next presentation is by the objectors. And I understand as we have two. First we have Fraser and Mitchell and Jim Tolmie. And my understanding is you're going to split this presentation. So I don't know what you've agreed to split, but I will again limit you to 5 minutes, and after 4 minutes, I'll ask you to sum up. And Mr. Mitchell, you speaking first?
That's correct, Convener. I'm going to speak first, yeah.
Thank you. If you want to proceed.
Well, thank you and good morning. I'm Fraser Mitchell, Planning Solicitor at Shoesmith, and I appear on behalf of Andrew Wilder. My client's full objection is contained in 2 letters dated 21 July and 1 October. I would ask members to review those before determining the application. My client has concerns in connection with the way in which the application has been assessed, which may render unlawful any decision taken by the panel today. Panel members have not been provided with all relevant information in connection with ancient woodland. Part of the application site is designated as ancient woodland. This designation is relevant to the application because there is a strong presumption against the removal of ancient woodland contained in national policy. The Council's approach to the ancient woodland is contained in paragraphs 2.88 and 2.89 of the panel report. It concludes that the application site suffers very high herbivore impact and is not ancient woodland of significant biodiversity interest. The Council's approach is not based on a full understanding of the available data from the Native Woodland Survey of Scotland and does not properly consider the strong presumption against the removal of ancient woodland. To explain in the time permitted, my client, who holds a first-class honours degree in science, has demonstrated in the addendum to the letter of 1 October that paragraph 2.89 of the panel report is factually incorrect. A correct analysis of the data shows the biodiversity interest of the application site has the highest rating in the Native Woodland Survey. The error in the panel report arises from the reliance on data relating to the impact of deer and livestock on the ancient woodland. However, there is no livestock on the site, therefore the purported impact referred to in the panel report has not and cannot occur. The panel report therefore fails to take into account relevant information and fails to properly consider the strong presumption against removal of ancient woodland, which may only be overcome by significant and demonstrable benefits being delivered by the application. In terms of bats, my client has three concerns. First, the Council considers the 2 bat surveys carried out in 2020 as sufficient in respect of the mature oak on the site. Nature Scot consider those to be initial surveys and expected further surveys to follow after the hibernation period. So far as we're aware, no further surveys of the mature oak have been undertaken. Bat surveys undertaken in 2021 relate to different parts of the site. Second, the panel report refers to the 3 key tests from the 1994 regulations that the Council must consider. However, it does this without making the panel aware of what key test 2 requires an applicant and the Council to address. Third, there is no evidence that the applicant has addressed key test 2. It requires satisfactory alternatives to be considered. There is no evidence that this process has been undertaken. These matters should be addressed before the application is determined, and failure to do so may render any decision vulnerable to subsequent legal challenge. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Ptolemy, you have just 2 minutes for your part of the presentation. Want to proceed, please?
Yes, thank you. My name is Jim Ptolemy. I am the Chair and Planning Consultant for Killarn Community Council, and I have been asked to make representation on behalf of the property owners and that part of the village. The main concern is the environmental impact and design and relationship to the surroundings. I've been asked to comment that the proposals do not comply with the LDP, in that Killarn is already ahead of the number of units targeted in the plan, but particularly re-Policy 1 placemaking, as it does not comply with the character of the wider location. It does not.
You have a minute left, Mr. Ptolemy.
Okay, it does not contribute to the character of surrounding built environment in terms of density and scale. For example, there will be up to 30 residents in a relatively confined space. The neighbourhood comprises 60 to 70 detached houses, and there would be a clear mismatch of the development. There's also a direct issue with lack of privacy where the 2 semi-detached units overlook the housing opposite. Overall, it does not represent a natural extension to the existing urban form. I would also say that, as a postscript to this, in 2017 this site was deemed unsuitable for 6 houses, and the planning panel at that time concluded then that a low small-scale development would not enhance the quality of the built environment. And we're just astonished that things have changed around so quickly. Our main concern is the 2-storey flatted unit, which we feel are totally out of scale. And although many attempts have been made, as Margaret has said, and they have addressed many of our concerns, we still feel that there are substantial issues outstanding that we cannot agree. And we did not ever reach agreement despite 6 or 7 schemes being prepared. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Tommy. I'm going to add the extra time you got on to the applicant, so probably the applicant will have probably 2 minutes once, if you want to take that up, Mrs. Vass, after the questions. Next section of the hearing is the presentation by a local member. I think we've got Councillor Rob Davis. Rob, again, if you want to limit your presentation to 5 minutes, and as per the Councillor's Code of Conduct, it's not me that makes the rules, but you have to leave the meeting after that. So if you want to proceed, please.
Hi, Councillor McPherson. Yes, I understand that. Yes, I just want to echo the comments from Mrs. Vass that the urgent need for housing in this ward, and particular affordable housing. I know from neighbours in the local area just how difficult it is to secure any housing at all, let alone affordable housing. As members will know, that the demographics of this ward are quite elderly, and there's a real risk that we're going to be becoming a society which is distorted towards the upper end of the age range. And affordable housing provides a real powerful mechanism to bring down the average age of the population in this part of the world, and that will have knock-on effects for the whole society, making it much more balanced. And the evidence for that is, as we're seeing, is the closure of local primary schools, where there simply aren't the young families coming through into the ward because they can't afford suitable housing. So I'd really echo Mrs. Vass's comments and her widespread experience as chair of Rural Stirling Housing Association. I take on board the comments about the LDP, but I would point out that Cullen and many other areas have quite a variety of architectural styles, and from what I can see of the plans, I think this will be perfectly acceptable in that. And finally, obviously, Cullen has its own special interest, but as a member of the whole ward, we get representation from many other villages where there is urgent need for housing, and there is a lack of suitable land in this part of the world. And this development is one of the few, I think, again, as Mrs. Vass has pointed out, that is available, that can be developed. We have the funding for it. And I would certainly urge the panel to follow the recommendations of planning and of Rural Stirling that this development go ahead. That's all I need to say, Councillor McPherson.
Okay, thanks for that, Rob. And okay, now we need to open up now for questions. This is from panel members to officers and to any of the contributors to the hearing. I just want to check first, as more as a point in order here, maybe for Graham Forrester, the solicitor here, in relation to the officer's Peter McKechnie's opening statement about adding, that's maybe for Chris Cox's question, I think, about amending a condition at this late stage. I just want to double check that, because my understanding was that any new information couldn't be brought forward more or less than 15 days before a meeting. So Chris, could you comment on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's the case, that new information from objectors shouldn't be submitted or isn't admissible after the report of handling has been compiled. So in this case, that's 15 days before panel. However, conditions are an area that ultimately applicants need to be agreeable to, or they could be appealing that condition. So it's, in practical purposes, it's always helpful for us to get agreement wherever we can on planning conditions. And in this instance, what's been pointed out is information that we didn't know, that it is relevant now to considering that planning condition. As I say, if the condition was to continue, then the applicant could appeal that condition. So really, we're kind of cutting across that process and trying to deal with it head on.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Questions from panel members? Any questions? Councillor Beryl?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Could I ask a question of the officer? I have some concerns about the density of this development. So, although Mrs. Vass pointed out it has been reduced from 12 to 11, but when you look at the plan views, it is strikingly a densely packed development. And I was looking yesterday evening at some views from Google Earth. It's an extremely narrow site, and made still narrower by the need to preserve some of the ancient woodland. And when you see the area of the site that's to be developed, compared with the existing houses across the road, I would guess that they're cramming 11 dwellings onto a space which across the road would only accommodate 3 or 4. So I think that looks quite jarring, particularly given the dominance of this site right at the edge of the village. So could Peter comment on the density of this development?
Peter, before you do that, I'm going to bring your attention to page 19 because it's connected to Councillor Beryl's question. At 2.24, my understanding was the planning permission in principle was for 13 units, 12 2-bedroom and 1 4-bedroom. So was it 13 previously, as per 2.24, or was it 12?
It's my understanding that the planning permission in principle, the only stipulation was that it was to be affordable housing. There was no stipulation on actual numbers. Okay.
No, that's fine. The Cullen Community Council say it was obviously 13, but on you go, Peter. Apologies.
Yeah, I mean, naturally, the affordable housing is a denser development. You're right. It will appear denser than the rest of the site. I mean, Lamson Road's been developed in the days where there was large garden grounds given to properties, and it's a low density development. Yeah, it's a far higher density, this proposal.
Okay, Councillor Beryl, do you want to come back in that, or let's go to Councillor MacDonald?
No, that's fine. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about a couple of points. Where did the trees on the site actually go? Because a bit of ancient woodland has just vanished, and I'm trying to understand how that happened, if there were permissions for that. Can anyone explain what went on there?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, previous owners have removed trees from the site, and it would appear to be without permission. We haven't fully established that yet. It's being looked into whether the permissions were applied, but we haven't found anything so far to say that it was applied for in terms of any tree felling license. And certainly there doesn't appear to be any permissions in terms of TPO for the removal of those trees.
Well, I'm concerned about that. I'm glad you're looking into that. I'd like you to explain as well that, so there's this removing the bats in the oak tree in the winter. So can you just explain to panel and the public what that actually means, how that works?
Out with my expertise, the applicants have their own ecologist who has a license, and the bats will be removed through that license through approval by Nature Scotland.
Okay, so it's the official approval. And can we see any images of the existing house to see how they fit with these new proposed houses? Is it a material thing, or is it just the massing and scale? Is there any images you can show us to try and explain that?
Yeah, see if I can find some. I mean, the rest of the site has a mixture of bungalows and two-story properties. So, bear with me a minute, I've got quite a number of pictures here. Just pull up Google Street View because most of my images are of the site actually.
You'll need to share your screen again, Peter, once you get it.
Yeah, will do. Okay. You see that okay?
Yep.
We've got single story with roof accommodation, bungalows, single story. I think if you go, yeah, you're further up the street, you've got your two-story properties, two-story as well on the other side there. And that's the site down that end there. So there's a mixture of single story roof accommodation and two-story properties.
And the materials match in your view, do they?
Well, this has certainly concrete roof tiles are proposed. They've got stone blocks where it's brick that's proposed as part of the development for the affordable housing. Render's proposed, and it's got render on these houses. So they don't entirely match, but it's they're not far off.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think you say 2.63, Peter, that they integrate well, obviously with a suitably finished and integrate well in the landscape. I've got a question for Margaret Vass. Mr. Vass, in relation to the, obviously you mentioned the demand for housing in Kildare, I think you came up with the figures 12-1 for Strathblane. Do you know what the actual figures are for Kildare? Presumably they're quite similar.
It's 12-1 for Cologne.
Kildare, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is absolutely significant in relation to the adapted bungalow, and that's earmarked for a family with a disabled member, presumably. Did you say? Yeah.
Yes, it's not often we actually design a house particularly for a family, but this family is in such urgent housing needs. That's exactly what we've done. So it's very nearly a first.
Okay, good. That's excellent. Okay, any further questions? No, if there's no further questions, the recommendations contained at page 15, and obviously this will be subject to the amended condition. Does anyone want to move the recommendation? Page 15, recommendation 1. I'm happy to move it as amended with the condition that Peter McKechnie said. I'm looking for somebody to second it.
I'll second, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Farmer. Is there anyone otherwise minded? Councillor Birrell?
Yes, Chair. Could I move for refusal, please?
On what grounds?
I'm taking into account everything that's been said by support by the developer and the objectors, and recognising the urgent need for affordable housing in this area. I still have concerns, particularly the ones raised by the chair of the Community Council, that despite extensive negotiations, I can't remember how many redesigns he said were presented, it was still not possible to reach agreement. And I'm concerned that this is overdevelopment of the site. And he made the point, and I know we're not bound by this, but he made the point that in 2017, the site was regarded as being unsuitable for 6 houses, and now we're going to put 11 dwellings on it. Recognising there's planning permission in principle already in place, of course, but I think there's too many houses for this very narrow and restricted site. I'm concerned about the massing, about the height of the buildings, and the mismatch in the density of this development compared with the existing houses across the road.
Okay, I'm just going to, before I ask somebody to second that, I'm going to check with Chris Cox whether or not these are robust planning reasons for going for refusal. Chris?
So thank you, Chair. I noted 3 reasons there. The first one related to overdevelopment, which is something that you would need to say why you think it's overdevelopment in terms of the site itself and its surrounding. You did reference the number of units that were in the plan permission in principle, but a plan permission in principle is only ever an indication, and it doesn't specify or bind any numbers. So when you get to this stage in the process, an applicant really has to justify the number of houses on the unit. So that takes us back to needing to be able to say, in your opinion, why it's overdevelopment in terms of the design of the site. The second reason was related to the numbers. I've talked about that. And then the third reason was related to the massing and height of the proposal. And that is a valid material planning consideration. But again, you need to explain why you think that the massing and the height is too much, and being a bit more specific round about the detail of that.
Okay, before what I would suggest is you go and have an adjournment, Councillor Birrell, to work with the officers to come up with robust plans. But I just want to double check: is there a seconder for refusal here? We don't to second, Councillor Birrell. No, so you don't have a seconder quite clearly. So on that basis, unless otherwise minded, the application's approved. Okay, so there's no one otherwise minded. Okay.
Chair, could I ask for my dissent to be recorded, please?
Okay, that's fine, thanks. Okay, we'll have a 2-minute recess now before we move to, so the application's approved. We'll have a 2-minute recess to allow the contributors to the hearing to leave the meeting. Okay. Commence the recording and the broadcasting, please. Okay, thanks for that. And David, I think we're obliged to have a roll call again.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'll just confirm the members present again. Councillor Birrell.
Present.
Councillor Dodds. Councillor Dodds.
Sorry, I had to leave. Back again.
Councillor Farmer.
Present.
Councillor Gibson.
Present.
Councillor Houston.
I'm here.
Councillor McPherson.
Here.
Councillor MacDonald.
Still here.
And Councillor Thompson.
Present.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thanks, David. We'll move to agenda item number 6, which is the full planning permission for proposed modification to the design of a dwelling house approved under 19/00980, full at garden ground of 12 Wellgate Drive, Bridge of Allen. And I think, Jane Weir, this is your application. Jane, if you want to proceed.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can see the presentation on the screen now in front of you.
Yep, got it, thanks.
Okay, yep, thanks, Chair. As mentioned, this application seeks to amend the design of a previously approved house type at 12 Wellgate Drive in Bridge of Allen. As shown on your screen, the location of the site, it bounds to the north of number 12 in Wellgate Drive, which is currently formed of garden ground. As noted in the report, permission was granted in 2020 for a 1.5-storey dwelling house of approximately the same footprint. The site is shown as existing on the screen in front of you just now. The application in front of us today proposes to vary the house design previously approved in regard to the window position, scale and projection, height and boundary treatments, which includes further removal of hedges and the installation of a boundary wall to the front facing onto Wellgate Drive. It includes increased glazing to the front in the form of dormer extensions and a glazed central front-facing gable, and the additional finishing materials would differ from that previously approved. However, the site is to be accessed and serviced as previously approved. The plans on the slide in front of you just now show a comparison between the original approved plans from 2020 and the proposed plans under this application. I'll just take you through a series of the plans on your screen just now. This shows the proposed plans to feature a central projecting gable at no higher than the ridge height proposed, with the 2 dormer extensions at either side. And This plan in front of us just now shows the landscaping plan, which shows some of the hedging which surrounds the site to be retained and some of that to also be replaced with a stone boundary wall proposed partially along the front elevation as well. This slide shows a comparison of the previously approved elevations and that proposed under this application. The main changes as seen, however it's a little bit faint, is that and as mentioned, hedging will be replaced and a boundary wall formed on the front. The following slides just show a closer view of the proposed elevations. And some sections of the proposed house type as well. And the floor plans which show the entranceway and a large upper hallway where the gable is centrally proposed. And this block plan shows on your screen separation distances from the proposed dwelling house to the neighbouring dwellings within Wellgate Drive. I can take you through a series of photos of the site as well. So this is taken from a site visit in July and it's viewed looking northeast within the garden ground of 12 Wellgate Drive. It shows the site as existing, currently enclosed by tall Lowlandii hedging. And the opposite, looking in the opposite direction, the house in the background here is number 12 and it just shows that there's an opening into the garden ground which slopes slightly down towards that property. And this is a view from the driveway of 12 Wellgate Drive, which shows that opening. And an image of that existing property at number 12. The following slides are images taken from the cul-de-sac of Wellgate Drive. So on the left-hand side of the image is the site proposed where the hedging bounds immediately onto the road as existing. And just a further view of that side of the site as well. And taken from the corner, looking back towards southeast with the hedging here. This image just shows examples of some of the house types on 12 Wellgate Drive. And this image shows an aerial view. So you can see it's a large rectangular plot orientated north to south and enclosed by mature hedging. As outlined in the report, the consultees raised no objection and advice was sought internally from the tree officer and sustainability officer in terms of the tree removal and biodiversity concerns raised, and all considerations raised by neighbours in objection have been considered. So the main consideration is therefore the acceptability of the proposed house type and tree loss in comparison to that previously approved, and as noted in the recommendation in the report, it's considered acceptable in terms of revised layout, siting and design, and not considered to give rise to unacceptable negative amenity impacts or natural heritage or landscape concerns. And the site can be suitably accessed and serviced, and it's therefore recommended for approval subject to the conditions outlined. Thank you, Chair. That concludes our presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks for that, Jane. Open up now for questions. Councillor Dodds.
Thank you. One of my main concerns is that are we ripping out all the leylandis down the front from the gate was right down till it bends around to the left hand side? Are they all being removed? All those leylandis, are they being dug out, taken out completely, or are they just being trimmed back to you call it a hedge? I mean, some of them are about 10 foot tall. So are they all being ripped out completely and then being replaced by a hedge?
Yeah, I'll pull open the landscaping plan if you just bear with me. Some of the hedging is to be retained and some of it is to be replaced. So in terms of the front facing hedge here, this existing hedge is to be replaced. A tree report was provided with the application which confirms that these existing hedges are of low value and low desirability, not worthy of retention. The neighbouring trees are to be retained. Obviously, they're in the neighbouring plot and they're to be protected by way of condition, expecting tree protection plans. And the majority of one hedge here is to be retained, which was recommended in the tree report, along with the hedging to the northeast to be retained and partial hedging of hedge 2 here to be retained, and otherwise it's to be replaced or removed as noted in the red hatching on the slide.
Thank you. And I take it the main entrance to the property will be through the metal gates into 12 Wellgate, and then the entrance that you showed us earlier on, where there's a little walking gap. I take it that will be widened to allow the vehicles to go into the new property. The access is not from Wellgate Drive; it's actually from number 12. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I'll just pull open the site plan. Sorry. Yeah, the access as existing is through gates into number 12. There will still be parking space associated with number 12, and then with the proposed house as well.
Okay.
Sorry, I have one other thing, but I'll wait until the end because I want to ask if it's possible to add another condition if the application is approved. Okay,
Councillor MacDonald.
I was just going to ask about the hedging, and I vanished there because my Teams crashed. But I understand. I sort of understand where you're coming from. Is the whole length of the hedge being reduced from 10 feet, or is it just some of it staying full height with a wall in front of it? Is that right? And then you've got some gaps so you can get in.
Yeah, I mentioned that partial elements of the hedging as existing are to be retained, and other elements, including that to the front, are to be replaced, and a boundary wall is proposed as well. A landscaping plan has been provided and is conditioned to ensure that the maintenance is carried out in accordance with that, and further tree protection as well of the neighbouring trees. So a thorough condition is attached. I think it's condition 1 of the appendix in the report.
Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the zinc roofing appears out of character with the adjoining houses. I know they've made arguments that there's precedent in other areas. Could you perhaps give your reasoning why you've accepted zinc roofing in this situation?
Yes, in this context, the zinc roofing is still considered to be a high quality material. While it doesn't match what's existing on the neighbouring adjacent property, it's still considered suitable, given that there's an existing mix of house types within the immediate vicinity. And the application site is out with the conservation area boundary as well. So given the style of the house is generally modern in appearance, the zinc roofing and the other materials proposed are considered to match and be appropriate for that setting.
Okay. You want to come back to Councillor Thompson and see if still get your hand up? No. Okay, any further questions? No. Okay, the recommendation, and Councillor Dodds, I will come back to you. The recommendation is contained in page 39 to approve the application. And want to move for the recommendation, page 39?
I'm happy to approve the recommendation as one, if I can add a condition, possibly.
Okay, right. Well, you want to discuss it? Let us know what it is, and we'll obviously get Chris Cox to decide.
Yeah, because there are a number of other properties there. You've got a large estate on the right-hand side, which is Beaconcroft, and then you've got Kenilworth Gate. With the construction of this size, there's going to be loads of vehicles going in, heavy-duty vehicles, construction vehicles, blah, blah, blah. I'm just wondering whether we can put in a condition that the applicant is responsible for cleaning up the road, because the vehicles will come off Kenilworth Road, so they'll go past the entrance to Beaconcroft, then they'll go past the entrance to Kenilworth Gate, where the cars will come out, and it's a nice area. And it's the road in Kenilworth Road is obviously in the conservation area, but I'm just wondering whether we can ask the applicant to be responsible enough to make sure that the road is kept clean and tidy for the other people using that road that are leaving Kenilworth Gate and Beaconcroft.
Okay, I'll need to also Chris, do you want to?
Okay.
Confirm whether that's would be a relevant or any condition could be attached to address Councillor Dodd's concerns?
Yes. So construction activity is not something that is covered by planning control. So it's not something that we're able to apply conditions over. Generally speaking, there are some exceptions to that, but not in this instance. But what we can do is apply an advisory note that would advise the applicant that those measures would be welcomed and encouraged.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Okay, anyone to second Councillor Dodds?
I'll second him.
Okay, that's fine. Is there anyone otherwise minded? No. Okay, so the application's approved. Move now to item 7 on the agenda, which is the demolition of existing garage, outbuilding, erection of dwelling house at Kings Park House, 21 Victoria Place, Kings Park, Stirling. And we have Peter McKechnie for this one. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Peter McKechnie, Planning Officer. I've processed this application. As you rightly point out, this is an application for the erection of a dwelling house within the curtilage of Kings Park House, which sits at 21 Victoria Place in Stirling. The application involves the demolition of an ancillary listed building as well, which is category B listed by virtue of curtilage with the main listed building. The property also sits within the Kings Park conservation area. Moving on to slide 2, here we have the location plan, where we have the red line site, which depicts the extent of curtilage that's to go with this proposal. We have the blue line, which sets out the remainder of the land that the applicant owns, but also clearly defines the remaining curtilage that will be left with number 21 Kings Park House as well. The proposed house is to obtain access from the rear access lane through a hole in the listed wall with parking here, and also there's a parking space shown at the front of the property here, but that's currently associated with number 21, so the main parking for this property will be from the rear. As you can see from the extent of curtilage that's shown here, it's quite comparable with a similar previous approval where conversion and new build was allowed to create 21A on this side of the number 21 Victoria Place. We have the Kings Park here to your left, and the Kings Knot is not too far ahead, but it's off here to the north. And we've got the Victoria Place running along the frontage of the site itself. Here we have an aerial image of the site. So here we have the application site with rear access going to be proposed from the lane to the rear. Here we have the outbuilding that's to be demolished as part of the proposals. 21 Victoria Place with its strong boundary wing walls either side, but the wing wall on this side has been altered and developments taken place to form in a separate dwelling house on this side. In terms of the slide that you're looking at here, this is the existing site plan. It's proposed to, as part of the development, to completely remove the roof, and this rear wall here is to be removed, and proposals are to keep this wall as part of the new build development. These small buildings here have already been demolished. They're attached to the main listed building, and they form part of a separate retrospective application for listed building consent in terms of controlling the demolition that's already taken place there. These are existing elevations that show 21 Victoria Place here, the main listed building. This is 21A that's been formed in the past. We have the wing walls, the main listed building. The outbuilding that's subject to the demolition as part of this application sits in behind this wall and is used as a garage. That's currently a garage door there. Here we have the outbuilding that sits down in behind the wing wall, and here are the two wee small ancillary extensions that I was mentioning that have already been demolished and part of a separate application. Here we have an image of the outbuilding where you can see the roof has been altered in the past. It's got a large part of it's a felt roof, and that's the other wall here that's to be demolished. And you can see it's quite a number of alterations have taken place with poor quality build in terms of that as well. This wall here is being retained as part of the proposals. But again, that's been altered, that's been pebble dashed, and it's proposed to take all that off and bring it back to its sandstone as part of the proposals. And when I look at the elevations, well, when we all look at the elevations in a wee while, I'll make reference to these roof lights, which is a key consideration in terms of the proposals and the impact on neighbours. These provide daylight and sunlight to the neighbour, to their kitchen come dining room, which is an objection in terms of loss of daylight and sunlight. My report predominantly reports this as a kitchen, but I've since received correspondence that they do more use it as a dining area. It's obviously a kitchen, but there's a strong part of it is for dining and socialising within. Here we have an image of the wing walls. As I say, that the outbuilding is currently used as a garage where it's accessed through these garage doors here, and you also have an access here through the door into the back garden. These walls, this wall is retained as part of the proposals. Inside, inside the main curtilage itself, as you've come through that access door through the wing wall, as you can see, this wall here is to be retained as part of the proposals. These are the two buildings, including this wall here, that's already been demolished and part of the separate application. This application looks from this picture looks from the rear garden ground, looking across the outbuilding towards the outbuilding, which you can see here, which has its altered roof and sits down lower than the wing walls itself. This picture here is from the frontage looking towards 21 Victoria Place from Victoria Place Road. This is 21A that's been altered to form a separate dwelling house in the past. This is the wing wall with the outbuilding that sits down and below down that wall, and that's the neighbour's lean-to roof with the kitchen dining area. Moving on to the plans. Here we can see this area here is the two-storey element of the proposals. It starts off with a single-storey element, which retains that wall in that area there. So you come in through a door that used to be the garage doors and into the courtyard, into a single-storey element, and then it rises to a two-storey element, where you have hard-standing pathways round about the perimeter of the build, and leading then to the rear parking court to the rear, which is coming in off the access lane at the back of the property. As pointed out, the property adjacent has a single-storey kitchen dining area with roof lights. The roof lights, they sit to the southwest of the proposals, and in terms of my assessment of the impact on this, My report sets out that it's a kitchen and there's no habitable room element, so therefore there's no impact. Considering it now as a kitchen dining area, the dining area has a habitable room consideration. The sun comes round, it's considered that sunlight will still be received within these roof lights, and also daylight will naturally come in this gap. There'll still be the sufficient gap to allow light. Predominantly, there's a lot of overshadow already caused by the existing property as the sun comes round and during times when the sun's lower in the sky. So this natural daylight is already, and sunlight is already affected by the two-story element of the main house. But as the sun comes round from the west, particularly in the spring and summer months, there will, because this area here is single story, there will be sunlight and daylight still coming in to these roof lights. The purpose of putting this plan up is to set out clearly in terms of the red, the extent of demolition, although this is an earlier plan, so that wall is to be retained and the rest is either being demolished or is going to be demolished as part of the proposals. And there's also a condition that sets out a conservation method statement to ensure that wall is retained as part of the proposals. Moving on to the proposed elevations. As you can see, there's 21 Victoria Place. We have the wing wall. We have the proposed build that sits here, which will be seen coming above the wing wall. These two-dimensional drawings don't really help because it makes it appear as if it's just coming up above the wing wall, right close to it, but it's actually going to be set back quite significantly in terms of its overall appearance. So here you have the single-story element with the wall being retained, and then rising to the two-story. So set back, so it's not immediately coming up above the wing wall to reduce impact. Coming round to this elevation here, it's all to be glazed in here, and at the moment it's shown to be aluminium glazing, but there's a condition that stipulates that's to be timber framed glazing. The neighbour who's raised concerns about the roof lights sit in this area here. Yes, that this is all glazed. It forms an internal balcony, so there's no external element here. There's a barrier that you can stand. These doors will open. There's a barrier, and the main views are towards the King's Park. It's not been designed to view directly into these roof lights. Potentially, you could stand away over here, look towards the roof lights, but I would imagine, it is considered that views into those roof lights, you'll be getting views in the ceiling areas, not directly down into the living accommodation. Also to the rear of the property, leading down into the garden area, because the house is to be sunk down to meet the level of the single-story element, because after you've gone past this point here, the ground raises up, so it's been sunk down to reduce its impact and scale and ensure that it follows through with the single-story outbuilding and the wall that's been retained. So therefore it needs steps to that higher part of the garden there and leading down. This again is glazed. There's quite a lot of glazing, but again the views are designed to go out towards the rear garden there. And it's considered that when you come out onto the steps, you'll be going straight down to the garden. There's glimpse views across garden areas, which are predominantly protected by tall boundary walls, but there will be views across rear garden areas. Here are the proposed floor plans with bedrooms on the ground floor and living accommodation and kitchen and dining space on the first floor to take advantage of the views, particularly the living accommodation here. The sitting room has been designed to look across towards the King's Park. And again, here we have the roof, which is to be a slate roof, and it's been well broken up as well through the use of glazing and roof lights. This image here shows the extent of demolition that's already taken place. This image here shows the wall that's to be removed. As you can see, it's been quite altered over the years and is not of a great standard. This image here as well is internal to the outbuilding. It shows that the roof has been altered. There's new timbers. It's not the original roof and roof timbers. This shows the extent of demolition. So the rear walls to come away, including the roof, and this wall here is to be retained. Here we have a picture looking south from the frontage from Victoria Place. Sorry, it's looking southeast. And we have the neighbouring property at number 22 here, and the wing walls with the wee outbuilding stuck in is tucked down in behind the wing walls. And then looking northeast, we have 21 Victoria Place and 21A that's been formed as part of our previous approval. And that ends my presentation. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter. Open up now for questions. Any questions, Councillor Farmer?
Yeah, Peter, as I'm sure you'll be aware, the conservation officer involved in this application had put a report on the portal which was highly critical of the application, and I don't actually see the sentiments of the officer expressed, and therefore I'm concerned that we're getting a partial view here rather than a more comprehensive view, because it's me, if there is a difference of opinions in terms of officers, that's perfectly fine, because it's the panel here that will discern and decide and weigh up the factors at hand here, and I'm just concerned that that report was not made available to elected members so that we could actually have a look at the considerable concerns of the conservation officer, who was not only highly critical, but indeed was opposing this application. And I don't see that balance in this report. So I would just like your views on that.
Yeah, I mean, the report from the conservation officer is a note to the chief planning officer that's to be considered as part of the actual assessment of the application. It's not an external consultee, so it's not something that should be made publicly available on the portal. It was made in error available. It's my considerations that I have assessed the concerns raised by the conservation officer and also the concerns raised by Historic Scotland. I have set out the concerns within my assessment of the development, but I've also set out where I consider the developer has met those concerns in terms of the fabric of the outbuilding is such that the heritage value has been eroded of that outbuilding. I mean, predominantly Historic Scotland were concerned about the loss of listed fabric. A lot of the listed fabric has already been removed and altered over the years. And in terms of the impact on the character and setting of the listed building, I consider that the scale of the proposals, the way it's been set back from the frontage and its height in relation to the listed building and neighbouring properties, overall it's considered to have a neutral impact on the character and setting of the conservation area and the main listed building.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I was just a bit, when you started to mention the roof lights and the way it was set back and then there was a balcony, I was I was trying to understand how you calculated the sight lines. If you've used a drone or you've used a very long selfie stick or whatever it is, or you've done some maths, how have you actually calculated you can't see through the roof lights? I'm trying to understand that because it is set back, not all the way, halfway through the roof lights, let's say. So can you explain that in a bit more detail?
Yeah, maybe if I show this drawing here. Share this drawing. Section was provided by the applicant. So yeah, this section was provided that sets out that the line of sight from the kitchen won't be affected by the proposals. And in terms of this being a glazed, what you call it, a gable here, somebody will stand. If somebody stood, in this area here, it's considered that they would be looking across, which would give views into that area there, rather than, it's my consideration from assessing the proposals. And it's a difficult assessment because I would need to be standing at that level there. But, it's my consideration if you would need to come out the building, stand right there and look down. I would consider to really impinge upon the privacy of that room.
So just to understand that, in some of the drawings, it looks like an entire glass face, but on this drawing, it's just glass to the left. Is that correct?
No, it's an entirely glassed face.
Right.
That's it there. That's entirely glazed in that area there, where it's been designed to offer views out towards the King's Park. But the glass will open, and then there's a balustrade here, so you can stand in that area there and be in the fresh air. Although it's not coming out to form a terrace in this area here, but you can stand and see out.
Well, if we decide to approve it, that's a big if, because there are now considerations about the conservation reports and all that. Could I ask for the condition that if you can see into the skylights, that there would be the consideration of something like a mesh panel or an opaque piece of glass to obscure that view as a condition?
Opaque glazing is sometimes used as a condition, so that would need to be a consideration of the committee at the end, should that be considered necessary.
Mike, you want to come in here?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Michael Mulgrew, Development Management Team Leader. Just by the condition that was requested by Councillor MacDonald, we could only apply that at the point that the decision has been taken. We would not be able to effectively have this property built and then decide to retrospectively apply a condition for opaque glazing. If panel decided that they would prefer opaque glazing as a condition, we would need to do that up front as part of the decision-making process and not at a later date, because we can't do it retrospectively.
All right, well, can I just, what I'm asking for is I'm not asking for the glass face to be opaque. What I'm saying is if you could build an opaque piece of glass that comes out like a little wall to obscure the view. So that's what I'm asking about.
Oh, screening, right, okay.
It's, yeah, basically an opaque piece of glass screen or a mesh screen or something like that to obscure that view. That's what I'm really asking for.
Chris,
screening along the single-story element, in a sense.
Yes, correct.
Chris, do you want to come in here, because presumably we're going to have to assess this application as it's sitting.
Yes, to reach that view as to apply that as a condition, it needs to meet the tests of conditions. So it needs to be deemed to be necessary. So without that condition, then you would be refusing planning permission on the basis that you have concerns about privacy. The officers explained how the considerations around about privacy have been derived, and in the main that the fact that our supplementary guidance defines habitable rooms not as comprising kitchens, and this being a kitchen. So whilst this could be a condition, I think you need to be very clear as a panel that it is of such concern to you that there's a privacy impact that you'd be applying that condition.
That would still be relevant and still be appropriate to add that condition as such.
Well, yes, it's relevant, but I think you also need to take a view as to whether it's appropriate in terms of the visual impact of that screening. So we don't have those proposals in front of us, but you need to take your own view as to what you think that visual impact would be.
Chris, you mentioned there, sorry, Chris, you mentioned there supplementary gains. Is this a supplementary gains SG12 we're referring to here?
That's right, yes.
My question would be, and it's relevant to Councillor MacDonald, and this, I'm looking at that just now, and I looked at earlier on there, obviously about daylight and sunlight and such like, and it obviously mentions here the way that this is calculated, protecting existing daylight house extension and new buildings. So Peter, I take it cognizance was given to SG12 when you were coming to your recommendation, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And it's a 45-degree approach and everything was taken into account for that, yeah?
Well, when the building faces windows, it's the 25-degree approach, which is shown within that section.
Okay, no, that's fine. Councillor MacDonald, sorry, Councillor Beryl.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I had two questions, if I may, for the officer. First of all, Peter, it seems to me, reading your report, there's a bit of a contradiction. Maybe you can comment on that. You say yourself at para 238, it is considered that the proposals presented inconsistent frontage, and so on and so on, in comparison with the existing rectangular frontages on the street. You go on to say that although this is irregular in the conservation area context, it assists with ensuring the integrity of the listed building is maintained by ensuring the new building is subordinate to the listed building and does not compete with it. And if I could paraphrase that more colloquially, it seems to me that saying, apologies for putting words in your mouth, well, it's inconsistent with the conservation area, but at least it's not as bad as it might be because it's set back from the road. When I compare that with paragraphs 225, 226 of the report, it talks about the fact that obviously you can have development in a conservation area, but the proposals mustn't harm or damage the listed buildings or their setting. So the key words to me, hang on, I've lost them. Yeah, earlier on in 225, it talks about development which protects or enhances the conservation area. So for me, the key question is, would this development protect or enhance the conservation area? Now, it seems to me that in para 238, you seem to be saying, and correct me if I'm interpreting it wrongly, you seem to be saying, well, it wouldn't enhance or protect it, it would make it slightly worse, but it's not too bad. So apologies for that colloquial usage, but could you comment on that, Peter?
Yeah, no, in 238, I'm accepting that the form that it takes with the gable end and the glazing is not in keeping with the streetscape, because it's predominantly square frontages with rectangular windows all along the frontage there, with the odd bay window and such like and dormer. So I'm acknowledging that fact, and that's all I'm doing with that there. I'm not coming to a conclusion whether that has an impact on the character and setting of the listed building. What I'm also saying at that point is that it has to be designed that way, or the fact that they have designed it that way helps to preserve the setting of the listed building. because they've introduced considerable glazing, which reduces the massing of it. So then it won't be as obvious within that streetscape, the fact that its overall height, the fact that it's set back so far from the walls, and it's well glazed. It won't read so obvious within the overall setting.
Yeah, Chair, could I come back to that and ask Peter, in your professional opinion then, Peter, would this development protect or enhance the conservation area?
There are elements.
So why?
There are elements of it that preserve the character and setting of the listed building and the conservation area, and I've concluded at the end of the report that overall there's a neutral impact.
Okay, Peter, before I ask Councillor Farmer to come here, obviously you mentioned 21A, which is obviously was an infill development in the past as well, which is obviously not set back and it's more dominant. So are you comparing it with that one as well then, presumably?
I mean, the only purpose was that to show is that there is a history of this form of development within this area. And I think the only relevance is that it helps in terms of the arguments made for the density, the impact on density of the character conservation area, that this will create a similar cartilage to that at 21A.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Farmer.
Thanks, Chair. And going back to something that Chris Cox alluded to, and just Peter, for the avoidance of doubt, you seem to accept that it is not merely a kitchen that's adjacent to the property, that is in fact a dining area and social area, and therefore would be regarded as a habitable room, which puts a very different light on the issue of privacy. And again, I have serious concerns about the extent of glazing that's been used that could be intrusive or perceived as intrusive to the adjoining property. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, well, as I've included within my presentation to yourselves, I mean, the predominant thrust of the objection letter was regarding a kitchen, but I do accept there is a mention of it also being a dining area, which is within the SG a habitable room. So I've set out within my presentation the considerations of the loss, any loss of daylight, sunlight, and privacy.
Okay. You want to come back on that, Councillor Farmer? No. Okay, if there's no more hands up, the recommendations in page 57 to approve application subject to the conditions. And got to move the recommendation. I'm happy to do it. You know, I trust the officer's judgment in this one. I know it's a challenge, but there is precedent there already on site with 21A where there's been infill development. This is set back, and you know, there's a fine balance here. I get that, but I'm going to move for approval. But the second, that Councillor MacDonald.
Sorry, I'd like to add that condition of having a light permeable screen to prevent looking into the neighbouring house.
Can I just double check with Chris Cox that you know, I'm looking at this SG here that says loss of privacy and overlooking can be minimised by, you know, boundary treatment. So it is in accordance with the SG. Chris, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, you can apply it as a condition. Just I'm struggling in my own mind to visualise what that would look like in terms of being effective. As a basis of screening intrusion into the roof lights. I don't know, Peter, if you're able to add more in terms of how Peter's undertaking the assessment of, as he set out in the report, of the privacy calculation. So I don't know, Peter, if you've got a view about how that objective could be attained.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of any screen, coming back to this image here, it would need to be out on the single story element of the proposals, and you would be, I mean, it's already set down the development compared to the roof lights. So any screen is going to be probably up about this height here, pretty tall, and quite intrusive. And I generally, in terms of the actual impact on privacy, it has been designed, this room, that you sit and look towards the King's Park. It would be intentional views you would be trying to get into these roof lights, and you would need to go away across here and look across. And I would consider that you wouldn't be looking directly down into the kitchen unless you came out onto the single story element of the proposals and then stood here and looked down into the kitchen dining area. And I've been assured by the architect that's not the intention. It's you'll be sitting in this room and you'll open the doors and look towards the King's Park.
Well, I don't know if it's 100% necessary, but that resolves it for me. The screening, you can't see whatever size that needs to be, just a little bit of screening. That was what I was asking for.
Well, presumably that would be, if it's not a sufficient condition, Chris, would do an advisory note again then, presumably?
Sorry, I was on mute there. Sorry, this is one that would be a condition if it is deemed to be necessary and appropriate rather than an advisory note. What I come to, though, is you need to say why the screen is necessary, coming back to what the officer has set out as to why there is not a privacy impact. So you need to be able to substantiate that there is in your view, there's a privacy impact that's different from the assessment that's been set out.
Sorry, can I just add here that the SG sets out that where windows, habitable room window looks directly into habitable room window, then that's a material consideration for loss of privacy, and that's not the situation here. It doesn't look directly into these windows.
Okay.
Are there hands up here, Councillor Farmer? So we've got
I would, Chair, I would like to move refusal. And I know that this report is full of subjective opinion, and I would have to say that in my view, the proposal is incongruous to the character and setting of the King's Park conservation area, and that the proposal in terms of its height and mass of the building and the use of extensive glazing is again contrary to the character and the setting of the King's Park. This is one of the principal buildings in King's Park, and I really feel strongly that putting a two-storey house in place of what was a single-storey coach house that was set in underneath and behind a wall is just taking it too far, and in my view, that it is totally inappropriate for this area.
Okay, and does anyone want to second that? Chris, can I just check that these are robust or sufficient planning reasons first?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, there's two reasons there that I noted. One was that the proposal is incongruous to the setting of the conservation area. Again, that is a material consideration. It is a matter of judgment, but again, Councillor Farmer will need to say why he's reached a different view from the officer's recommendation on that, and just detail that further. The second was related to the height and massing and the use of external glazing. Again, material planning considerations, but again, Councillor Farmer needs to go further and say why in that particular location it is such a concern. And then lastly, in the balance of considerations, just whether those considerations are contrary to the development, the proposals in your view are contrary to the development plan and particular policies.
Okay, I suggest then that obviously if Councillor Farmer gets a seconder, then that you go into a recess to flesh out the full details of that. So does anyone want to second Councillor Farmer? Councillor Houston, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Chair. It was actually to second your proposal to move the recommendation of the officers in the paper, but with the exception of Councillor MacDonald's addition, because I recognise the concern that's there, but I think the officer has determined that there isn't a lot of privacy by looking at the paper, and I think a good intentioned addition to it from Councillor MacDonald may actually decrease the amount of light going in to the adjoining property as well. And we need to be cautious about that. But in trying to protect them, we may actually damage the light getting into the property. So I would like to just second your proposal for accepting the recommendations of the officers as set out in the paper. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Liston. Does anyone? I'm still looking for Councillor Farmer's amendment to be seen as seconded. Councillor Beryl, you got your hand up?
Yes, it's probably a first, Chair, but I'll second Councillor Farmer.
Okay, that's fine. Is there anyone otherwise minded? Because what I'm suggesting we do here, rather than go to the vote, because Councillor Farmer's reasons for refusal need to be fleshed out further. We'll have a recess until such times that that's done. So can we stop the recording here and go into recess? broadcasting the recording, please. Okay, thanks for that one. And David, we'll need to do a roll call again.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Just to confirm the members, Councillor Barrow.
Present.
Councillor Dodds.
Present.
Councillor Farmer.
Present.
Councillor Gibson.
Present.
Councillor Houston.
Present.
Councillor McPherson.
You're here.
Councillor MacDonald.
Here.
And Councillor Thompson.
Present.
Okay, that's everyone. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that, David. We'll reconvene on agenda item number 7, the one at 21 Victoria Place, so that Councillor Farmer and Councillor Beryl could discuss with the Chief Plan Officer valid reasons for going for a refusing application. Councillor Farmer, over to you. Do you want to say anything further?
We've basically agreed the wording with Chris Cox, and she's tabulated that down. So, Chris, if you could read them out, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. Yep, there's actually, we've broken it down into 3 reasons for refusal, so I'll read those out. So the first one is that the modern design of the proposal and the proximity of the proposal to the traditional listed building would have a negative impact on the characteristics of both the conservation area and the setting of the listed building. The second reason is that the coaching house is a traditional feature of listed buildings in the conservation area, and the height of the proposal at 2 stories protrudes above the wall and would have a negative does not protect the conservation area and would have a negative impact on the conservation area. And the third reason is that the expanse of glazing as an architectural feature is incongruous to the traditional features of the listed building.
Okay, Councillor Hart, Councillor Farmer and Councillor Beryl, you're happy with that? Okay.
Yep. Yes.
Just before I hand over to the clerk to vote, Councillor MacDonald, I proposed that you seconded, obviously, that your seconded was on the basis of requesting some form of screening. Are you going to withdraw that now, or what's your intention? Just because I need to somebody second. Well, Councillor Houston's already offered, but you were in first.
I think I'll withdraw that because it is set down, but it remains a concern that I'd like noted in the planning approval, if that's what we do.
Okay, so I'll hand over now to David to carry out the vote.
Thanks, Chair. Just to confirm, we have the motion to approve the application subject to the conditions set out in the appendix, moved by Councillor McPherson, seconded by Councillor Houston, and the amendment to refuse the application for the reasons stated, moved by Councillor Farmer, seconded by Councillor Beryl. So, first of all, voting on the amendment from Councillor Farmer to refuse the application, please indicate for, against, or not voting. Councillor Beryl.
For.
Councillor Dodds.
For.
Councillor Farmer.
For.
Councillor Gibson.
Not voting.
Councillor Houston.
Against.
Councillor McPherson.
Against.
Councillor MacDonald.
Against.
And Councillor Thompson.
No.
Councillor Thompson.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. For.
Okay, so the amendment is carried by 4 votes to 3 and becomes a substantive motion. So voting then again on that substantive motion to confirm the panel's decision, please indicate for, against, or not voting. Councillor Beryl.
For.
Councillor Dodds.
For.
Councillor Farmer.
For.
Councillor Gibson.
Not voting.
Councillor Houston.
Against.
Councillor McPherson.
Against?
Councillor MacDonald.
Against.
And Councillor Thompson.
For.
Okay, and the substantive motion is carried by 4 votes to 3 and the application is refused. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that. So the application is refused. So we'll move to item agenda number 8, which is the siting of a portable kiosk to serve cold food and cold hot drinks. This is a retrospective application at Kirkhouse Inn, Glasgow Road, Strathblaine. And Ian Jeffrey, this is your application.
Yes. Ian Jeffrey, I'm Senior Planning Officer. I'll just open the presentation. Sorry, my screen's frozen. The application is for retrospective planning permission for the siting of a portable kiosk to serve cold food and cold and hot drinks at the Kirkhouse in Glasgow Road, Strathblaine. The site is located within the village of Strathblaine, as outlined in red on the location plan. It's located within part of the car park to the side of the Kirkhouse Inn. The site fronts onto the A81 Glasgow Road. This is along the frontage, and the site is accessed. The site is accessed directly from the Glasgow Road, the A81 itself. The position of the kiosk sits parallel to the adjacent Kirkhouse Inn itself. That's the position of the kiosk there in the red. That's the remaining area of the car park for use for the Kirkhouse Inn. To the rear, there are houses at the rear of the site, and also directly across at the opposite side of the Glasgow Road. Another layout of the kiosk sitting adjacent to Kirkhouse Inn and dimensions, footprint of the building, 3.6 metres long and 2.3 metres deep. There's the site access into the car park from Glasgow Road just there. Some photograph of the kiosk in situ shows a height of approximately 2.5 metres high, coloured mainly black with a red base, of modest scale building in its context, and a side on view of it there. Houses being positioned to the rear, and sort of the bin store for the hotel, the Kirkhouse Inn, and the really bins there, and slatted fence, screening for the adjacent housing. There's 7 objections received, 2 letters of support, including support from the Community Council, and recommendation to approve subject to conditions, one of which is for temporary planning permission for 2 years. Thanks, that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thanks for that, Ian. Questions? Councillor Beryl?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I had a couple of questions relating to the proposed conditions. First of all, condition 1, which specifies that by the 31st of October 23 that the site must be cleared and the site restored to its former condition. Presumably that's valid and that's in practice is going to be enforceable.
Yes, it is enforceable. It'll be whether something is enforceable is whether you can clearly see whether it's still there or not. Sorry if that sounds a bit obvious, but it has to be very clear, evident non-compliance. But yes, if it gets to the point where we're beyond 31st October 2023 and they're still operating the kiosk, then enforcement action could be taken. It is as is commonplace, they could apply for a renewal of planning permission, and that would be, the merits would be assessed there and then, but that's not really relevant for this committee. Yes, it is enforceable.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. The reason I'm asking a question is that the operators to date have not shown themselves to be very considerate operators. They've caused significant nuisance to the neighbours. So I would be anxious that conditions can and will be enforced. That's not really a matter for us, I appreciate. Could I also ask, condition 5 specifies that there should be no tables around the kiosk or in the car park. And I think that came from a recommendation from the environmental health officer. Now, one of the objectors has written in to state that the applicant is separately applying to the licensing department, which would permit seating inside this area. If there's any, supposing that was granted, again, I suppose perhaps it's not a material issue for us, but if that were to be granted, and then there's a conflict there, which would take precedence. If licensing department says that they can have tables there and the planning condition specifies that they can't, what would take precedence?
I've got Carla's got hand up here. Carla. Carla Roth, you had your hand up.
Sorry, I was muted. As a legal matter, alcohol licensing only, if granted or not, would only authorize the sale of alcohol in a particular area. The licensing board does not authorize particular seating or whatever. So these are two distinct issues, and whether or not an application to include a particular area in the vicinity within the area licensed to sell alcohol would not per se authorize putting tables there. The licensing board does not have authority to authorize that one way or the other.
So could I just clarify then, Chair, if this application were to be approved today and the proposed amendments were to be part of the approval, so condition 5 would be quite clear then, that there must be no layout of seating or tables in the car park and around the kiosk. That would be quite clear.
Ian, just clarify that, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, it's clear that they would have to adhere to that planning requirement.
Okay, Councillor MacDonald.
Sorry, I was just going to question that it says portable kiosk, but clearly that looks like a semi-permanent structure to me because it's physically shaped to the ground. It's completely useless anywhere else. So is it actually a permanent structure we're giving a 2-year temporary planning permission to?
It's classed as a portable kiosk, but Ian, you want to clarify?
Yeah, it's portable in as much as it can be taken away, for example, on the back of a lorry, that type of thing. It doesn't necessarily have to have wheels. Whether it could be mounted on wheels and towed along, I just don't know. But it's it can be put on and it's like a caravan or something like that. You can a cabin, you can put it on the back of a vehicle and take it away. So in that respect, yes, it's portable.
Okay.
Councillor Houston.
Thanks, Chair. I want to come back to this question of seating. I mean, the advice that we've got actually puts us in an invidious position, because we're saying we can put a condition on here to say no seating in and around the kiosk, but in terms of licensing, you can say you could delineate an area for outside drinking and they could put seats out. And we're then saying if you're having a drink, you can have a seat, but if you're having a takeaway, there you can't have a seat. And who's going to enforce that? It just makes us look silly, because two separate bits of the council have got two different approaches to one common problem. So could we have some clarity around that, and less of the kind of legal obfuscation about this?
Okay, Carla or Mike, whoever wants to go first. Carla?
Just say the area might be licensed for the sale of alcohol, but that authority and inclusion within that licensed area is not authority to override a separate planning condition that you cannot put seats in that area. So any layout of a licensed premises is subject to the planning requirements on that premises. Now, at the moment, the committee, I think what we're saying is that licensing considerations are not relevant to planning, but two, we have, I understand, an objector who has said there is a planning application, but the panel does not have in front of it confirmation that that is in fact the case.
Okay, that's fine. That's pretty clear. Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just to pick up on Carla's comments that whether there is or is not a licence in place now or at a future date, and the inclusion of a seating or planning permission. So it would be the applicant's responsibility to make sure that they've got all the necessary consents in place, should that be something they wish to do in the future. So as Carla has said, what we are granting at them, well, what we are, should panel agree the recommendation, what we are granting does not have seating areas, and should a seating area be proposed, they will require a new planning application at that point.
Okay, Carla, is that a legacy hand, or do you want to come back to that?
Sorry, legacy hand.
Okay. Okay, any further questions? If not, the recommendations on page 77 at 1 to approve subject to the conditions and reasons set in Appendix 1 attached to the report. Not to move the recommendation. Okay, Councillor Thompson, I'd ask for a show of hands if you're going to be moving it, so just for the recording and the broadcast. So Councillor Thompson, you want to move for the approval? Okay, seconded by, can we do this by a show of hands, please? You know, you really need to do it with a show of hands. Right, I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to second it. I don't know whether or not this screen's frozen here. Is everybody here and everybody okay, yeah? Yeah, okay. So Councillor Thompson's proposed that, I've seconded it. Is there anyone otherwise minded? No. Okay, so the application's approved. Now that brings us close today of the planning items. We're going to go into the regulation item. There's only one item, and it's an exempt item. So I've been told to get on to stop the recording and the broadcasting.
Actually, there's
sorry, Chair, there is a non-exempt item before the exempt item. There's a taxi driver.
You're absolutely correct. Apologies for that. So we're moving now to item 9 on the agenda. Stephanie, over to you. Item 9. This is the determination of a civic licence application, taxi vehicle licence restricted to rural areas. Stephanie.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon. This is an application for a restricted taxi vehicle for rural areas only. As the panel are aware, the current unmet demand survey has been delayed due to COVID and not been able to get it carried out. So what we're using at the moment, we have clear evidence to show that there is no unmet demand within the city centre, but we have no no record of no unmet demand in the, oh hang on, I've got that wrong. There is no evidence of no unmet demand in the rural areas. So in other words, we can't prove whether or not there is, so the recommendation for this one would be to grant this application with the condition that it can only apply for hires with 5 miles of the city centre. So it can operate in any of the rural areas, it just can't come in the city centre.
Okay, so there's two recommendations here, Stephanie. So you're saying you're removing the recommendation?
No, sorry. There is two. It's up to the panel whether or not they want to go with either of them.
Okay, open up now for questions. Questions from panel members? No, Councillor Thompson.
Could I ask? There's an implication that there'll be a spare plate because of the change to the rural plate for the urban area. How would that be advertised if that is the case? It's the applicant that said that, so I'm not sure it's entirely the case. But if you could explain, please.
Okay, so the applicant is operating as a driver for another operator. So it's not like the vehicle would the plate would come back to the council. The operator of that vehicle would just then get another driver to drive it. This person wants to set up on their own. Okay, yeah, that's clear. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? No. Okay, obviously there's two recommendations here. Here from panel members. Anyone to move recommendation 1 to grant it?
I'll move that, Chair.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Houston. Is there anyone otherwise minded? No. Okay, so that application then is the decisions to grant the licence, that one. Okay, we're going to move to the exempt item E10 on it, and obviously now I have to get the recording and the broadcast to stop. Owen, can you do that, please?